She touched the scar on my face. And the alien queen remembered everything. The spires of Lyrian Prime's palace didn't rise so much as grow, lattices of pale green crystal twisting into the sky like frozen lightning. Twin moons hung low on the horizon, their light caught and scattered into shimmering veils that draped the ceremonial courtyard. Commander Rowan Cade tugged at the collar of his dress blacks for what felt like the 100th time. He'd walked through gunfire without blinking. He'd flown patrols through debris fields that chewed ships to ribbons. Yet walking toward the palace where the first true human Valari treaty might be born made his stomach feel like it was full of broken glass. "Stop mauling your uniform," Ambassador Hale murmured beside him, long fingers flicking a bit of imaginary dust from Rowan's shoulder. "If you look like you're about to bolt, the entire Alliance delegation looks like it's about to bolt." "I am about to bolt," Rowan muttered. He didn't reach for the pale ridge of scar that cut from his temple to the corner of his mouth, but his cheek tingled like it could feel his thoughts. Last time humanity tried this, 4 border sectors nearly seceded just to avoid picking sides. That was then. Hale's voice stayed mild, but the lines around his eyes were tight. Queen Ceres is not her father. She's a reformer. She wants this. Wanting and surviving are different things, Rowan said. The palace doors, a solid sheet of living crystal, began to glow from within. Singing, soft, wordless, and harmonically wrong to human ears, thrummed through the floor. "Showtime," muttered Dr. Amina Sol, their cultural envoy, under her breath. The doors parted with a sound like a chime being drawn out for miles. The throne hall beyond was an enormous cavern of faceted stone, walls pulsing with slow bioluminescent veins. At its far end, atop a dais grown from a single crystal pillar, rested the throne of Lyrian, and on it, Queen Ceres. The dossiers had called her severe, strategist, pragmatist. None of that captured the reality of her. She was tall for a Valari, draped in layered robes that shifted from dark violet to pale blue as she moved. Her skin was the soft hue of sea foam, traced with faint, luminous lines that pulsed in time with her slow breaths. Her hair fell in a cascade of midnight shot with starlight, threaded with slender metal circlets, but it was her eyes that hit Rowan like a punch. Valari eyes were usually a solid, luminous color. Hers were molten amber, bright and deep, and full of something he couldn't name. Command? Grief? Recognition? The herald's voice rippled with harmonics that made Rowan's bones buzz. "The delegation of the Terran Alliance is acknowledged. Ambassador Elias Hale, Commander Rowan Cade, Cultural Envoy Dr. Amina Sol, Security Attaché Colonel Vance Ibarra, present yourselves before Her Illumined Majesty, Ceres of the Luminous. Crown, Keeper of the Echo Flame, Sovereign of Lyrian Prime." They walked, footsteps echoing dully against the crystal floor. Protocol said eyes forward. "Do not meet the monarch's gaze until addressed." Rowan obeyed, mostly. He felt her attention lock onto him halfway down the hall, a weight between his shoulder blades. Hale bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, we bring the hopes of the Terran Alliance for lasting peace between our peoples." "Ambassador Hale," Queen Ceres replied. Her voice was music wrapped around steel, each word carrying a faint resonance that danced along the walls. "Lyrian welcomes your delegation. May this day begin the mending of old fractures." Ceremonial phrases traded hands like cards. Blessings, acknowledgments, invocations of ancestors and shared stars. Rowan could have recited them in his sleep. He'd drilled them for weeks. Yet a low thrum of wrongness built in his chest the closer they drew. When she finally turned her full gaze on him, the world narrowed. "Commander Cade," Ceres said, "you stand as military advisor to the Alliance delegation?" "Yes, Your Majesty," Rowan answered. His voice held steady, but pressure built behind his ribs. "I'm honored to represent our defense forces in matters of mutual security." Her eyes widened. The luminous lines along her skin flared too bright for a heartbeat. "Step forward," she said softly. Hale shot Rowan a quick, alarmed glance. This wasn't in the script, but he gave a subtle nod. Rowan walked the last stretch alone, each step oddly soundless. The chamber fell utterly quiet. Ceres rose from her throne. Whispers rippled behind him. Valari courtiers startled by the breach of form, human delegates shifting uneasily. The queen descended the dais, robes whispering over crystal, every line of her body graceful and heavy with meaning. She stopped close enough that Rowan caught the faint ozone and citrus scent of her. Up close, he could see the fine, jagged pattern of a healed burn on the inside of one wrist, almost hidden beneath metal cuffs. Her hand lifted, fingers trembling in the air, inches from his face. "May I?" she murmured, pitched so low he almost thought he imagined it. His throat went dry. "Yes, Majesty." Cool fingertips brushed the raised line of his scar. She traced its path slowly, from temple to jaw. Her breath hitched. All the light in the room seemed to lean toward them. "It is you," she whispered. "Stars. You survived." The hall held its breath. Rowan's heart slammed against his ribs. His vision tunneled, white around the edges. Somewhere distant, Hale said, "Your Majesty?" Voice sharp with alarm. Ceres didn't look at him. Her gaze stayed locked on Rowan, eyes molten and suddenly wet. "Lieutenant Rowan Cade," she said, and his stomach dropped through the floor. "Terran Colonial Defense, Concordia Spire Cultural Liaison Security, Section 7. No one here should have known that rank, that posting, that station. For a moment, the crystal hall dissolved into screaming alarms and red emergency strobes, the taste of metal and smoke on his tongue. A narrow maintenance corridor full of fire, a pair of luminous amber eyes staring at him through smoke and fear. "Aris," he breathed, the name dragged up from a part of his soul he'd buried years ago. Not Queen Ceres, the name he'd known before crowns and titles. "Princess Aris." Her expression broke open like a wound in a sunrise all at once. "They told me you died," she said, voice shaking. "They told me all of you died." "And they told me no Valari made it out," Rowan rasped. Her fingers feathered over his scar one more time, reverent, disbelieving. "I have carried the memory of that line on your face for 23 years, she whispered. "I thought it was the shape grief took when it refused to fade." Behind him, Hale swore under his breath. Colonel Ibarra shifted closer, ready for trouble. Dr. Saul stared, wide-eyed, the academic facade melting off her face. "Commander Cade," Hale said tightly, "what is the meaning of—" Ceres lifted her free hand for silence, still touching Rowan's scar with the other. "Ambassador," she said, voice regaining a queen's iron even as tears stood bright in her luminous eyes. "Your commander and I share a past history your briefings did not include, a history that was buried." She paused, gaze flicking between Rowan and her court. "A history that may decide whether this peace is born or strangled in its cradle." The hall rippled with fear, hope, suspicion. Rowan stood in the center of it, the weight of 23 years of lies settling over his shoulders. For the first time since he'd set foot on Lyrian Prime, he knew one thing with absolute clarity. Whatever this day had planned for him, protocol was already dead. The private council chamber felt smaller than the throne hall, but somehow more dangerous. The walls were darker crystal here, the bioluminescent veins pulsing in slow, thoughtful rhythm. A low table of fused glass separated the humans from the queen. Its surface glowed with dormant interfaces. Rowan sat rigid, hands flat on his knees. Ambassador Hale leaned forward, palms planted on the tabletop, mask of diplomacy stripped away. "Start talking," Hale said. "Slowly, clearly." Ceres sat at the head of the table. She had removed her crown, setting the circlet aside on a slender stand, but nothing about her felt less regal. If anything, the absence of the metal made her more dangerous. This was not the remote figure from the dossiers. This was the woman pulled out of a burning station. "Concordia Spire," Rowan said, throat rough. The words tasted like ash. Joint Human Valari Cultural Platform. Neutral orbit above Keelan's Gate. Official record states. Catastrophic systems failure. Terrorist attack. Total loss of life. Total fabricated bullshit, Saris added quietly. Hale shot her a sharp look. Your Majesty, with respect. With respect, she cut in. I watched my classmates suffocate in vacuum because someone vented decks to space and locked the hatches. Her gaze found Rowan's. He carried me through corridors that were already failing. He shoved me into the last emergency pod when there was room for only one. I was ordered to secure the Valari delegation, Rowan said. Memory crawled under his skin, hot and cold at once. Then ordered to abandon the station when it was obvious we were losing her. I disobeyed both. And saved my life, Saris murmured. Dr. Saul's eyes were bright and hungry, mind clearly filing away every detail. Joint station. Early cooperation. If Concordia had survived, the entire trajectory of human-Valari relations might have shifted. Whoever destroyed it had motive. Motive and reach, Saris said. She touched a small crystal node at the edge of the table. A hologram blossomed into the air. Concordia spire, elegant and tall, its rotating rings linked by slender spokes. Labeled sectors flickered into being. Valari Cultural Archive, Human Embassy, Shared Laboratories, Hydroponics. Rowan's chest tightened. I haven't seen those schematics in years. I have seen them every 10th cycle, Saris replied. The day Concordia fell, I mark it by returning to this image. Until today, it was a memorial. She swallowed. Now, it is evidence. Colonel Ibarra finally spoke, voice low and gravelly. Evidence of what, exactly? Saris's fingers danced over the projection. Parts of the station glowed red. Here, she said, human life support relays. Here, Valari gravity regulators. Here, cross-species emergency escape routes. All sabotaged remotely in the 30 minutes before the first bomb. Rowan frowned. Remote access logs were wiped. On your side, Saris said. On mine, someone forgot that the Royal Education servers pulled a shadow backup. I was 20 at the time. No one thought to ask whether I had systems privileges. Her mouth tightened. The logs don't show who, but they show how. The sabotage was designed to look like extremists from both species hit the station simultaneously. Hale stared at the red zones blooming on the projection. Why bury this? Because admitting we failed to protect Concordia would destabilize my court, Saris said flatly. Your High Council, I suspect, feared the same. Easier to blame nameless radicals. Easier to declare everyone dead than to ask who profited from the disaster. Rowan exhaled through his teeth. And now those same people, or their protégés, Saris said, smell another threat, an actual treaty, a binding commitment to cooperation. They will move again. And you didn't think to mention this before we came? Hale asked Rowan sharply. I thought she was dead, Rowan shot back. And the last time I accused my own command of covering things up, they buried my report and shuffled me to the quietest frontier patrol they could find. I learned the lesson, Ambassador. Silence hummed between them, taut as a drawn bowstring. Finally, Dr. Soul cleared her throat. Forgive me, but there's a personal element here we're dancing around. Saris's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. You mean the part where a human lieutenant and a Valari heir fell in love on a cultural exchange station that exploded around them? Hale pinched the bridge of his nose. Of course they did. Rowan felt heat crawl up his neck. Your Majesty. Don't, she said quietly. We are alone here. Call me Saris if you can't bring yourself to use the name you once did. He swallowed. Saris. Dr. Soul watched them with open, almost greedy fascination. You were there for how long? 6 months, Rowan said. Long enough to learn that Valari food is mostly terrible, that their music is better than ours, and that some people are worth throwing your career away for. Saris's hand tightened on the table edge. We studied each other's art, each other's myths. He snuck me off station once to see a Terran sunrise. We argued philosophy until dawn in the hydroponics ring. Dr. Soul mouthed romantic idiot under her breath, not quite quietly enough. Hale straightened. Whether feelings were involved or not, he ignored Saris's sharp look. We have a situation. There is a buried joint tragedy, evidence of coordinated sabotage, and now the leaders of both peoples are discovering it together in secret in the middle of treaty talks. If this leaks, the optics are... His face twisted. Apocalyptic. Then we decide, Saris said. Do we continue to bury Concordia, pretend we are strangers, and allow the saboteurs to act from the dark again? Or do we drag them and ourselves into the light? Go public, Rowan said immediately. Hale stared at him. You want to stand in front of both our peoples and announce that you fraternized with the enemy princess, survived an event officially recorded as total loss, and your joint governments lied about it for 2 decades. Yes, Rowan said, because if we keep lying, they win again. They'll hit these talks the same way they hit Concordia. Only this time, the scale will be bigger. Saris's gaze held his. He saw the same war inside her. The Queen calculating risks, the survivors screaming to finally stop running. We need more than suspicion, she said slowly. We need proof no one can twist. Then we find it, Rowan said. Where do you store 3 centuries of secrets on this rock? A shadow of a smile touched her mouth. In the Under Archives, she said, where my ancestors put everything too dangerous to destroy and too damning to acknowledge. She rose, reclaiming her crown, not placing it on her head, but carrying it in one hand. Ambassador Hale, Dr. Soul, Colonel Ibarra, she said, voice once more a queen's. For now, this conversation does not leave this room. I will escort Commander Cade to the Under Archives personally. Hale opened his mouth, closed it again. Majesty, it's highly irregular for a queen to walk alone with a human soldier beneath the palace? Saris's smile sharpened. Commander Cade has already carried me through worse. She turned to Rowan, eyes bright with something like challenge. Come, Lieutenant, she said deliberately, reaching back across years to the rank he'd worn when he first took her hand. Let's go dig up the bones under this piece. The descent into the Under Archives was like sinking into the heart of a sleeping beast. Saris led Rowan down a spiral of crystal steps that gradually darkened, the glow from the upper palace fading into a soft, steady pulse beneath their feet. Guards at the initial entrance bowed and stepped aside without comment. The deeper they went, the fewer witnesses there were. At this depth, the palace interfaces with the older lattice, Saris said quietly. Our ancestors grew the first citadel around a natural crystal cluster. We built on and under their work. Sounds safe, Rowan muttered. No one's ever opened a vault full of ancient secrets and regretted it. She gave him a sideways look. You're still sarcastic. You're still walking directly into trouble, he said. Royal prerogative. The last stair opened into a vast chamber. Crystal pillars rose like trees. Their trunks shot through with threads of soft blue light. Between them floated hundreds of hexagonal data nodules, each slowly rotating, each containing gods knew how much history. Rowan whistled low. You built your own hell for librarians down here. Saris's lips twitched. Archivists, and yes. She moved to a central plinth, placing her palm on a triangular recess. The lines along her skin flared brighter, a hum shivering through the air. The nodules shifted, reorienting like a flock of birds. Under Archive, Royal Access, she said, voice taking on a formal cadence. Query, Concordia Spire, Joint Communications, Classified Records, Off-Ledger Transactions, Cross-Reference, Project Stonevale. Rowan straightened. Stonevale? The code name attached to several of the buried files I found as a princess playing where I was not supposed to. Her mouth turned wry. You weren't the only one who disobeyed orders on that station. The plinth projected a web of light into the space between them. Lines connected files, accounts, encryption keys. Rowan stepped closer, instinctively mapping the structure like a tactical display. "That cluster," he said, pointing. "Those accounts jump through 5 neutral banks in 2 sectors. That's more laundering than ideology. Somebody got paid." "Someone always gets paid," Saris murmured. She began to peel strands out of the projection, each thread blossoming into text and figures. Payments from shell corporations, transferring to civic trusts on both sides. Donations to human security coalitions, endowments to Valari purity movements. "The same money-funded groups that allegedly hate each other," Rowan said. "That's not ideology, that's investment." "Profit from fear," Saris said. "Engineer a disaster, then sell your services as stability." He followed a path of red-tinted threads. "Here, cross-reference these routing codes with current traffic." Saris keyed another command. New lines lit up, overlaying old ones. The patterns matched almost perfectly. "They never stopped," Rowan said softly. "Whatever Stonevale is, it's still active. Same brokers, same banks. Some of the civic trusts are now political foundations." His jaw clenched. "Council seats," Saris's face hardened. "On my side as well." A distant tremor of voices echoed down the stair they descended. Patrol. The under-archives weren't exactly crowded, but they weren't supposed to be unsupervised either. Saris flicked her fingers, dimming the projection to a low, ghostly glow. "The more we pull, the more dangerous this becomes," she said. "If any of the names in these strands suspect we're down here—" "They'll accelerate whatever they planned for the treaty," Rowan finished. "Or for you." Heavy footfalls approached. Valari voices, one bored, one wary. "Routine sweep," one said. "Queen was in council. She won't come down tonight." Rowan's hand went to the sidearm, hidden beneath his ceremonial sash on reflex. Saris caught his wrist. "Don't," she mouthed. "They're loyal. Just not trusted with this." She tugged him behind a thick crystal pillar. They pressed close, the hum of the archive throbbing around them. The guard's steps drew nearer, then past, the beam of a handheld scanner washing inches from Rowan's boots. "Her radiance spends too much time below ground," one guard muttered. "Since the humans arrived, especially." "Maybe she likes the old stories," the other replied. "Or maybe she's looking for a precedent to justify inviting them in." Their voices faded. Rowan stayed very still. Saris's body was a line of warmth against his. He could feel the rapid beat of her heart where her shoulder touched his chest. "Some things never change," he whispered, breath stirring her hair. Her answering smile was small and unbearably familiar. "Like you breathing too loud when we're hiding." He huffed, half-laugh. "You always said humans sounded like broken machinery when we panicked." "You did," she said. Her hand was still on his wrist, fingers light but firm. She didn't pull away. "Rowan." The way she said his name almost unmade him. He turned his head. They were close enough that he could see the tiny fractures in her lower lip, the faint gold ring around her pupils. Close enough that if he leaned in, her gaze flicked to his mouth, then back to his eyes. For a heartbeat, the years between them burned away, and the under-archives were just a shadowed corner of Concordia's hydroponics ring. "Saris," he said, and the words scraped his throat raw. She swallowed. Her thumb brushed the edge of his scar, a touch so light it might have been imaginary. "If I let go," she whispered, "the last 23 years come crashing back. The fires, the lies. I am not ready to stand under that avalanche again." "You're not under it alone anymore," he said. "You never were. You just thought you were." Silence stretched, fragile and electric before she stepped back. The cool air rushed between them. "Then help me prove it," she said. "Help me drag Stonevale into the light." He nodded, swallowing whatever else had risen to his tongue. "Where do we start?" She gestured to the suspended web of data. "With the names," she said, "we start by learning exactly which pillars of our shiny new piece have wrought inside them." The crystals overhead pulsed in agreement, casting them in shifting light. Together, side by side, they began to pull on threads that had been woven in shadow long before either of them was born. Sleep did not come. Rowan lay in the guest quarters carved out for the human delegation, staring at the faintly luminescent ceiling. The images from the under-archives kept overlaying his memories. Red-highlighted systems, failures, merging with the real flicker of Concordia's dying lights. After an hour of pointless staring, he gave up. He sat at the small desk, thumbed his wristcom, and opened a private log. "Personal record," he said. His voice sounded distant in his own ears. "Rowan Cade, Lyrian Prime, Pre-Treaty Summit, Day 1. Subject, Concordia Spire." The station's name alone pulled him back. Concordia had smelled like recycled air, spiced food, and hot circuitry. Every curve of its architecture had been designed to scream neutral ground. Hypoallergenic materials, dual-language signage, gravity rings, tuned just slightly different between segments to keep both species comfortable. 23-year-old Lieutenant Rowan Cade thought it was the most boring post in the galaxy, right up until the moment he first saw Princess Eris. He'd been assigned perimeter security for a cultural exchange in the shared atrium. Human painters displayed pieces next to Valari light sculptors. A quartet played a hybrid piece, Terran strings weaving around Valari harmonic emitters. Eris drifted through it all like she belonged everywhere and nowhere. No crown, no heavy regalia, just a simple tunic shot through with luminescent thread and a pair of loose trousers, her hair braided back. She paused in front of a Terran photograph, a crumbling seaside town at dusk, and frowned in concentration. Rowan caught himself staring and looked away just as she glanced up. When he looked back, she was walking straight toward him. "You're standing wrong," she said. He blinked. "I'm guarding a door." "You're guarding a door like it insulted your ancestors," she said. "Feet too wide, hands too tight. You read as threat, not safety." "That's usually the point," Rowan said. "You're high—" "Call me Eris," she interrupted. "At least here. They've banned half my titles from official documents on this ring already." "Lieutenant Rowan Cade," he offered, then immediately regretted it. "Protocol, Cade. You don't introduce yourself to foreign heirs like a guy at a bar." She smiled anyway. "Rowan, you're from Terra itself? New Corinth?" He shifted his weight, self-conscious. "You?" Her look said obviously, but she answered anyway. "Lyrian, born in the upper lattice. Studied your people's art as a child. This is the first time I've seen some of it without a tutor telling me what it means." "And?" "And," she said, turning back toward the photo, "I think your cities are sad and beautiful and doomed." "Cheerful," he said. "I like doomed things," she replied. "They try harder." He laughed in spite of himself. "That's offensively accurate." It went on like that for months. She kept finding reasons to be wherever his patrol took him. Watching human films projected on the inside of the hydroponic dome. Sneaking into the observation blister in the Valari sector to show him Lyrian's twin moons through a proper lens. Arguing about whether Terran novels were obsessed with individualism or merely allergic to nuance. He taught her the basics of old Earth skating on a frictionless training ring. She tried to teach him Valari harmonic singing and declared his attempts endearingly violent. They stayed up too late, too often. He memorized the sound her laugh made in low gravity. She traced the faint line of the training accident scar that would later be joined by Concordia's far worse gift. Duty sat between them like a third presence. She was heir to a throne, even if her father considered Concordia a silly experiment. He was a junior officer, warned in no uncertain terms to keep things professional. They both pretended that what they had was nothing more than friendship, curiosity, cultural contact. The station blew that lie apart as easily as it blew apart everything else. "Rowan?" He jolted, heart stuttering. The log projection blinked out. The voice wasn't in his quarters. It was memory, curling up from the place where the worst night of his life lived. He forced himself to breathe, then reopened the recording. It started with a power dip. The lights dimmed in the atrium, then flared too bright. Music stuttered. The old human admiral hosting the banquet joked about aging wiring and ordered another round of drinks. 5 minutes later, the first explosion ripped through Sector 3. Rowan was on his feet before the shockwave finished shaking the room. Training kicked in, crisp and merciless. Secure the principals. Secure the exits. Get eyes on the threat. Only there were too many threats. Sections of the station lost gravity entirely. Others spun up to crushing levels. Atmosphere vented from corridors that should have sealed. The alarms weren't just blaring. They were conflicting, overlapping error codes from systems that had never been meant to fail at the same time. He found Aris in a corridor outside the Valari education wing, half carrying a younger student with a broken leg. Smoke clawed the air. The emergency shutters 3 doors down were jammed half open. "What are you doing out here?" he snapped. "Trying not to let my classmates die," she shot back, very inconsiderate of the terrorists not to schedule their attack for after exams. "I'm your escort," he said. "When things go wrong, your job is to make my job easier." "You took an oath to protect civilians," she said hotly. "Didn't realize it came with the fine print, unless they're inconvenient." Another explosion rattled the deck. Heat washed down the corridor. He grabbed the student from her with a muttered apology and slung the kid over his shoulder. "Argue after we reach an evac hub." They ran. Concordia had been built with redundant escape routes. On paper. In reality, half the ones on his HUD showed red, locked or open to vacuum. Someone had gotten into the emergency systems before the first bomb. By the time they reached the central hub, it was chaos. Humans and Valari both crammed into the chamber, shouting, shoving, clutching children and bags and each other. Emergency pods jutted from the walls like clustered seeds. "Capacity reached," a mechanical voice droned over and over. "Please proceed to secondary evacuation points." There were no secondary points. Not anymore. Rowan shoved his way to a console, slapped his ID against it. "Lieutenant Cade, security override row 7. Unlock sequence beta." "Denied," the station said. "Override channels compromised." He could feel Aris at his shoulder, breathing hard, hair singed at the ends. Her eyes were wide, but not with fear, with a kind of focused rage he'd only ever seen in seasoned soldiers. "Pod 15 still shows empty," she said, jabbing a finger at the display. "Manual latch?" "I can try." They shouldered through bodies, ignoring curses in 3 languages. Pod 15 sat at the far end of the chamber, its hatchlight flickering between amber and red. Rowan pried the maintenance panel off with his bare hands and jammed his fingers into the manual release recess, the metal bit into his skin. "Rowan," Aris said. The way she said his name made his stomach drop. "Look at the capacity readout." He did. 1 occupant. That was all the pod would take. 1 set of restraints. 1 emergency. Harness. Life support calibrated for 1 body. Another explosion hammered the station. The deck tilted under their feet. He didn't think. Thinking was for people with time. He spun, grabbed her by the shoulders, and shoved her backward into the pod. She hit the padded wall with a startled oath. "What are you—" "Brace!" he snapped. Her hands flew to his chest, trying to push him out even as he reached for the controls. "No. We both go, or—" "There's no both," he said. Something hot and wet was trickling down his cheek. He didn't remember when he'd been cut. "You're a princess. I'm expendable." Her eyes blazed. "You are not—" He palmed the manual close control. The hatch slammed down between them mid-sentence. For half a heartbeat, he could still see her through the small viewport, her face pale, eyes wild, palm slamming against the glass. Her mouth formed his name. Then the pod blew its clamps and shot down the launch tube, a streak of metal vanishing away from fire. The corridor behind him tore open. Flames roared in, hungry for air. He ran because dying there would make her sacrifice meaningless. He didn't make it to another pod. He barely made it to a maintenance crawl space, forcing the hatch closed against the pressure drop as half the ring gave way. In the end, it wasn't heroism that saved him. It was dumb luck, and a crumpled emergency cocoon that sealed around him just before Concordia's core went. Rowan stopped the recording, breathing hard. His hands had left faint impressions in the edge of the desk. On the wall opposite, the palace crystal gave a faint answering pulse, as if listening. "They told me no Valari survived," he said to the empty room. "They gave me a promotion, a medal, and a classified non-disclosure agreement." The ceiling stayed politely indifferent. Outside, somewhere above the labyrinth of crystal, a queen with the same memories was likely equally awake. And downstairs, in the cool hum of the under-archives, their enemies' names waited in lines of light, smug in the belief that ghosts never talked. By the time Rowan returned to the under-archives the next day, a quiet fury had replaced the hollow ache of memory. Ceres was already there, standing before the floating web of data. Today, she wore simpler robes, deep charcoal with only a single band of light tracing her shoulders. The crown rested on a stand beside her instead of her head. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said, without turning. "That's rich," he replied, stepping up beside her. "You look like you argued with your counsel for hours." "I did." Her mouth curved without humor. "Some of them are very concerned about my impulsiveness in recognizing you publicly. They think it makes me vulnerable to manipulation." "By me," Rowan said. "Obviously." "Are they wrong?" She glanced at him then, something sharp and fond in her eyes. "Yes. You were a terrible influence, long before this." He huffed a laugh. The tension in his shoulders eased a fraction. "What did you tell them?" he asked. "That I was already manipulated by you 23 years ago," she said, "when you refused to obey an order that condemned my people to death and carried me through fire instead." Her gaze flicked back to the data. "If they cannot trust the man who did that, they cannot trust anyone." He studied her profile for a moment. "That's going to make you enemies." "I already have enemies." She gestured to the glowing strands around them. "These will do nicely for a start." They got to work. The more they pulled on Stonevale's threads, the uglier the picture became. Shell companies formed within weeks of Concordia's approval suddenly funneled money into security consultancies that lobbied both governments. News outlets that had argued for caution in joint ventures shared a suspiciously similar phrasing in their editorials, phrasing that tracked back to a single ghost-written script. Names surfaced. A Terran senator whose public career had been built on responsible border defense. A Valari elder who'd argued loudly against reckless cultural dilution. Neither had their hands directly on orders, but their staffers, their foundations, their donors formed the backbone of Stonevale's money flow. "They bought influence in both capitals," Rowan said. "Every time a peace measure came up, Stonevale agents framed it as weakness. Every time tensions rose, they sold stability." "Merchants of fear," Ceres murmured. "Our legends warned us about beings like that. I always thought they were metaphors." "They usually are," Rowan said, "until they're not." Dr. Soul arrived mid-shift, escorted by a single palace guard who looked profoundly uncomfortable to be that far underground. She bowed to Ceres with fastidious respect, then turned a greedy gaze on the hovering maps. "You've been busy," she said, "and you didn't invite your favorite academic until now?" "I needed deniability," Ceres said. "If anyone noticed you missing from the delegation lounge for more than an hour, Ambassador Hale would tear the palace apart." "That man survives on caffeine and terror," Soul said cheerfully. "He'll live." Her eyes sharpened. "What have you got?" Rowan and Ceres brought her up to speed. When they finished, Soul let out a low whistle. "This isn't a fringe conspiracy," she said. "This is the spine of the old guard, people who made their careers on the idea that the other is always at the gate." "Now they're in the gate," Rowan said, "and in this room via their money." Soul flicked through the data with deft motions. "On the human side, Senator Carey is the obvious lightning rod. He's up for re-election in 2 cycles, and has been hedging his bets since your delegation left orbit. On the Valari side..." She trailed off, gaze, catching on a cluster of lines leading back to a single symbol. Saras's face went very still. "That crest," Rowan said quietly. "It's on the corridor banners upstairs." "Yes," Saras said. "It is the sigil of Elder Malin, long-serving advisor to my family, my father's most trusted counselor, and now mine." "You suspected him?" Rowan asked. "I suspected someone in his circle," she said. "I did not want to see his mark here." A muscle worked in her jaw. Want and truth are different things. Sol looked between them. "If you move on this half-cocked, they'll spin it as a power grab. Ambitious young queen destroys elders to cement her relationship with human commander." "They'll spin it anyway," Rowan said. "Our choice is whether we give them the whole truth or let them cherry-pick it first." He'd barely finished speaking when his wristcom buzzed with the urgent triple pulse reserved for diplomatic crises. He stepped away, tapping the interface. "Cade!" Hale's voice snapped into his ear. "Where the hell are you?" "Researching," Rowan said, "with Her Majesty, in a restricted archive I'm definitely not supposed to mention over an open channel." "Fantastic. Add protocol violations to the growing bonfire." Hale exhaled hard. "Listen, someone just leaked footage of you and the Queen in the council chamber. The bit where she touched your face, edited with all the worst possible angles. It hit the interstellar feeds 10 minutes ago." Rowan's stomach dropped. "How bad?" "How do you feel about trending under the hashtag #ScarLover?" Hale said, voice flat. "Because half a dozen networks are playing the star-crossed traitors angle like their lives depend on it." Saras watched Rowan's face, expression tightening as she read the shift. "It's out," he said to her. "Us. Concordia. The recognition." "Of course it is," she said softly. "Stonevale needed a distraction." Hale's voice barked in his ear. "The High Council wants you recalled to the embassy ship until we clarify the optics. Lyrian's Elder Council is demanding a closed audience with the Queen to discuss compromising entanglements. And every extremist feed in 3 sectors is screaming that the treaty is rigged." "Can they pull me?" Rowan asked Saras. "Not without insulting my sovereignty," she replied, "which they will hesitate to do. For now." Rowan lifted the comm again. "Elias, put me on the chamber schedule." "What?" "You heard me. If they're going to put my face on every damn screen in the galaxy, I'm not letting our enemies write the script." "Rowan..." He cut the line and turned back to Saras. "You wanted to drag Stonevale into the light," he said. "Congratulations. They turned the spots on first." Her eyes burned molten gold. "Then we answer," she said, "not with denial, with everything." She looked to Amina Sol. "Summon your ambassador. I will call my council, and we will tell the galaxy exactly who tried to murder Concordia and who has been bleeding it dry ever since." Sol's grin was fierce. "You know, this could topple governments." Saras's mouth curled in something that was not a smile. "Good. Some of them need toppling." Rowan felt the old, familiar prickle along his spine that presaged either disaster or victory. "Let's start a fire they can't control," he said. The under-archive lights flared in agreement. The joint negotiation chamber had been designed to impress, not to contain a riot. Tiered seating for both delegations arced around a central platform where the treaty tables waited, still mostly symbolic. Above, a dome of clear crystal looked out on Lyrian's pale sky. Today, the light filtering through it was harsh. Screens around the perimeter played the leaked footage on a loop. Saras stepping down from her throne, fingers brushing Rowan's scar, the camera catching the raw grief in both their faces. Someone had added swelling music. Rowan wanted to punch whoever had cut it. The chamber was already buzzing when he and Saras entered together through the main doors, deliberately making no attempt to hide their proximity. Hale stood near the Terran benches, face carved from stone. On the Valari side, Elder Malin and several other counselors clustered in a knot, their expressions ranging from furious to calculating. Conversation dimmed as the Queen stepped onto the central platform. Rowan moved to her right, Hale to her left. Colonel Ibarra and a pair of Valari guards took up positions at the perimeter. Saris didn't bang a gavel or call for order. She simply stood very still and waited. Silence spread outward like a pressure wave. "I assume," she said at last, voice carrying easily, "you have all seen the broadcasts." Murmurs. A few shouted accusations, mostly from the upper human tiers, where a hardline Admiral Rowan recognized sat stiff-backed. "The footage is authentic," Saris said. "I did recognize Commander Cade. I did touch his face. I did speak his name as I knew it when we last met." Elder Malin rose slowly, robes whispering. His crest glittered at his throat, the same symbol Rowan had seen traced in Stonevale's ledgers. "Your radiance," Malin said, voice laden with respectful concern so polished it squeaked. "No one questions your sincerity, but for the sake of the realm we must ask, how long have you and this human commander been involved?" "Involved?" Saris repeated. "As in, alive?" A ripple of uncomfortable laughter broke out. 23 years, she continued. On and off." Gasps. Hale closed his eyes briefly. "When we first met," Saris said, "he was not a commander, and I was not a queen. We were young. We were foolish. We believed Concordia Spire would change everything." She gestured, and the chamber lights dimmed. A projection of Concordia bloomed in the air above them. "You all know the official story," she said. "Catastrophic systems failure. Coordinated extremist attack. Total loss of life. What you do not know is that you have been lied to." She walked them through it. The sabotage, the wiped logs, the shadow backup she'd pulled as a bored princess. Rowan added his own testimony, what he'd seen, who he'd tried to save, the orders he'd disobeyed. "Both our governments chose to bury Concordia," Saris said. "They declared us dead because it was easier than asking why the station burned the way it did." "And now," Rowan said, picking up smoothly, "the people who profited from that chaos are moving again." He nodded to Dr. Soul, who cued the next set of projections. Stonevale's financial web, simplified for public consumption. Money trails arced from neutral banks to foundations to political offices. Some nodes were blurred, pending verification. Others blazed with damning clarity. A low roar built in the chamber as names appeared. "Senator Carey!" someone in the human tier shouted. "That's impossible!" "Elder Vethar?" a Valari delegate choked. "He sits on the Ethics Council." "They sit on whatever pays them," Rowan said. "For 23 years, Stonevale has funded fear. They orchestrated Concordia. Now they're pushing rumors and leaks to wreck this treaty before it's signed." "They're lying," a human admiral snapped. "You expect us to believe a story this convenient? Star-crossed lovers, tragic station, shadow conspiracy. This is propaganda." Saris's head turned, eyes narrowing. "Admiral Corrin," she said, "you commanded the 7th Fleet during the last border surge, did you not?" He stiffened. "I did." "Who approved your emergency funding?" Saris asked. "Whose signature is on the line that doubled your budget overnight?" The admiral hesitated, thrown. "The Defense Committee chair, Senator Carey." "Stonevale," Rowan said. "He sold you fear and paid for it with Concordia's blood." Hale stepped forward, voice cool and deadly. "We verified the transfers, triple-sourced them. Believe me, Admiral, if I could have ignored this, I would have slept better." On the Valari side, Elder Malin lifted his hands in a soothing gesture. "Even if some irregularities occurred in the past, to drag them into the light now, in this charged atmosphere, could destabilize both of our governments. Your Majesty, you are playing with—" "Truth," Saris cut in. "I am playing with truth, and I am done letting others hide it from me." She stepped closer to the projection, the light painting her features in sharp contrasts. "I did not plan to stand before you as the queen who fell in love with a human soldier on a doomed station," she said. "I did not plan to bear my past to your gossip feeds. But our enemies made that choice for us. The only decision left to me is whether I let them shape the story or claim it myself." She held out her hand without looking. Rowan took it, fingers closing around hers. Their joined hands hovered, a line of flesh and bone against the luminous map of Stonevale's corruption. "They want you to see scandal," she said. "See this instead. A human and a Valari who had every reason to hate, who chose to pull each other through hell. We are not a weakness in this treaty. We are its proof." "That's very touching," Malin said smoothly. "But sentiment is not the point," Rowan snapped. "The point is that whoever tried to kill her once is watching this chamber right now, and they're not going to sulk on a couch because their smear campaign got hijacked. They're going to escalate." As if the universe had been waiting for that cue, the chamber lights flickered. For a moment, the projections warped, Stonevale's map stretching and twisting. Then the alarm crystals around the dome ignited, bathing everything in blood-red light. A Valari guard sprinted into the chamber, armor humming. He bowed short, breathless. "Majesty," he said, "Outer Watch confirms multiple inbound signatures, unregistered flotilla, mixed human and Valari hull profiles. Vector, direct intercept with Lyrian orbit, estimated arrival, 4 hours." The chamber fell utterly silent. Hale swore under his breath. "They're going to hit the planet during the treaty talks. They're not trying to shape opinion. They're trying to obliterate the stage." "Of course they are," Saris said softly. She released Rowan's hand, only to grab it again, harder. "Then we will not give them the stage," she said. "We will give them a choice." She turned in a slow circle, gaze raking over both delegations. "Run," she said, "and prove them right, that humans and Valari cannot stand together, or stay. Sign this treaty under fire, broadcast it to every screen in every sector, and show them we will not be moved." "Majesty," Malin protested, "to keep all key figures in one location under direct threat is what cowards expect us to do," she said. "We will not cower. We will anchor." She stabbed a finger toward the hovering treaty. "Bring the document online," she commanded. "Open all channels. Let the galaxy watch us decide who we are." Rowan met Hale's eyes over her shoulder. "This is insane," Hale said. "It's Concordia all over again," Rowan replied. "Only this time we get to choose which side of the airlock we're on." He squeezed Saris's hand. "Let's sign your damn treaty," he said. "Then let's make sure there's still a palace to hang it in." The next 4 hours moved in simultaneous fast-forward and agonizing slow motion. Fleet channels lit up with frantic traffic as Lyrian's defense grid spun up. Human escort ships in orbit scrambled into formation, their captains suddenly very aware that they were about to fight alongside Valari cruisers for the first time in history. On the palace's top level, the comm center became a storm's eye. Holographic displays showed ship silhouettes and vector lines, bright friendlies and darker unknowns. Rowan stood with Colonel Ibarra and a Valari commander named Thalen Reese, coordinating through a hastily jury-rigged joint system. "Unknown flotilla, splitting into 3 wings," Thalen said, voice clipped. 2 headed for high orbit, 1 dipping low, likely to punch at the planetary shield generators. "Their hulls read like patched-together nightmares," a human sensor tech added. "Human hardware welded to Valari spines. Somebody went shopping at a scrapyard and a war memorial." "Extremist coalitions," Ibarra muttered. "They finally figured out it's easier to kill people than argue over who hates who more." Rowan cut in. "Have we confirmed no friendly transponders in that mess?" "Cross-checked 6 times, Thalen said. "Anyone they hijacked, they stripped." "Then treat them as hostiles," Rowan said. "But record everything. When this is over, I want proof on record that this wasn't one species attacking the other. It was traitors attacking everyone." Down below, in the throne hall now reconfigured as a signing chamber, Saris, Hale, and the core delegate stood before the projected treaty. Cameras hovered in silent flocks, broadcasting every breath to the galaxy. "Are we seriously doing this live?" Hale muttered over the secure channel. "In the middle of an incoming barrage?" "Yes," Saris's voice came back, clear and steady. "They want fear. We will give them a spectacle of defiance instead." The system pinged an alert. Unknown ships had reached the outer picket. "Impact in 10," Thalen said. 9, 8. On the hall feed, the treaty shimmered, its clauses scrolling in both scripts. Saris lifted the stylus, gold and crystal catching the red alert light. Do we have a visual of the enemy? She asked. Rowan patched one in. A second window opened beside the treaty projection, showing the oncoming flotilla, mismatched ships bristling with cannons, hulls so scarred they looked diseased. They will be watching their screens, Saris said softly. Let's give them something to choke on. She looked straight into the nearest camera. To the people of Lyrian, of Terra, and of the outer systems, she said, you are seeing this in real time. An alliance of cowards comes to kill us, to burn this attempt at peace as they burned Concordia's spire. She glanced toward one of the high lenses, toward them, the architects of Stonevale, wherever they were. You failed then, she said. You will fail now. She turned to Hale. Ambassador, he bowed slightly. On behalf of the Terran Alliance, I sign this treaty. He pressed the stylus to the hovering surface. His signature burned bright. On behalf of the Valari Crown, Saris said, and in honor of those who died believing we could be more than enemies, I sign as well. She took the stylus, and instead of immediately signing, she held it out to Rowan. Commander Cade, she said, you once swore to defend a fragile piece of unity on a station in neutral space. Will you witness this one? The request hit like a blow. Saris, he began. Please, she said quietly, for Concordia. In the comm center, every tech pretended very hard not to be listening. Rowan walked to her on the feed, the crystal hall's light painting him stark against the treaty's glow. He took the stylus, hands steady despite the adrenaline screaming in his veins. I witness, he said. He returned it to her and stepped back. She signed. The treaty flared, sending ripples through the air as systems authenticated it, copied it, transmitted it simultaneously to human and Valari archives, to neutral courts, to outernet caches that no amount of sabotage could erase. Contact, Thalen said. Outer defense grid engaged. Space lit up. Weapons fire surged across the holographic displays in the comms center. Human frigates and Valari lancers interwove their formations, sharing shield cover, creating kill boxes that had never been tested in any wargame. Enemy Wing 1 targeting joint patrols, a tech reported. They're trying to force friendly fire, mixing their IFF with ours, cycling codes. Override with the new treaty kernel, Rowan ordered. Paint everything broadcasting Stonevale's encryption as hostile. That's requisitioned code, sir, she said. Yeah, he said. Let's use their own toys against them. In the hall, the treaty's glow softened, hanging above the dais like a promise. Saris looked up at the battle feed. For a moment, her composure cracked, her fingers curling into a tight fist at her side. Rowan, she said under her breath, the mic picking it up anyway. He heard her through the secure channel. Still here, he said. Not dying on you in front of an audience again. Would be tacky. See that you don't, she replied. Enemy fire smashed into Lyrian's upper shields. The dome above the hall vibrated, a deep, bone-shaking hum. Hairline fractures spidered across one facet before stabilizers kicked in. Shield Layer 2 holding at 70%, Thalen reported. 3 hostile ships down. They weren't expecting us to coordinate fire like this. Extremists rarely understand cooperation, Ibarra growled. An enemy corvette broke formation, diving hard toward the planet. They're trying for a suicide run at the palace, the sensor tech said, voice tense. Not today, Rowan muttered. He keyed into a human destroyer's channel. Ashoka, this is Cade. You see that idiot on your scope? A gruff voice answered. Already got him marked. You calling for permission or a competition? First one to strip his hull gets a drink, Rowan said. Deal. A moment later, the corvette bloomed into vapor under combined fire. Keep Stonevale's cipher patch active, Rowan said. Every extremist ship that transmits it, we tag and record before we burn it. When this is over, No one gets to pretend they weren't involved. Outside, in the enormous dark, war raged. Inside, in the glittering hall, the leaders of two civilizations stood beneath a newly signed treaty, their fates now welded together. Saris looked into the camera one last time. "To those attacking us," she said, voice low. "You lost Concordia. You will lose Lyrian. You will lose Terra. You will lose everything you have built on fear. We are done being your fuel." The chamber shook again, but the dome held. In the comm center, Thalen's voice climbed. "Enemy formation breaking. Several ships are cutting and running." "Cowards don't like a fair fight," Ibarra said. "Let 'em run. Tag what you can. We'll hunt the rest later." "The largest signatures remain," the tech warned. "Flagship analogs maintaining position." Rowan stared at the hollow. Two massive ships hung back just outside the densest engagement zone, coordinating the chaos. "There you are," he murmured. "You bastards." His fingers tightened on the console edge. "Thalen," he said, "can your lancers punch a corridor through that debris?" "With the right timing," Thalen said slowly. "You plan to sail something through?" "Something loud," Rowan replied. "We hit their command ships at the same time from both sides. No one walks away thinking this was a messy misunderstanding." Plans took shape in his mind, a risky pincer that would rely entirely on human and Valari captains trusting each other's maneuvers down to the second. Trust, the thing Stonevale had spent decades poisoning. Rowan smiled, sharp and humorless. "Let's show them what happens when their victims start trusting each other anyway," he said. Coordinating two fleets that had never fought side by side before, in real time, under fire, using half-finished treaty integration protocols, should have been impossible. It wasn't. Barely. Rowan and Thalen worked like a two-headed beast, their voices overlapping as they called out vectors and timing. The Ashoka and its Valari counterpart, the Shard of Dawn, took point, smashing a hole through the densest cluster of extremist ships. "Path is open," Thalen said. "For the next 20 seconds, then it's debris again." "Plenty," Rowan said. "All strike units, this is Cade. You run that lane. You stay on your mark. You do not decide to improvise because you saw something shiny." A chorus of affirmatives, some crisp, some profane, came back. The Joint Strike Group punched through the breach. On the palace feeds, the watching delegates saw it all. The mixed formation arrowing toward the two largest hostile signatures, enemy fire raking their flanks, shields flaring. "Impact in 10, the sensor tech said. 9, 8. "Synchronized fire at 3, Rowan said. 2, 1, now." Human torpedoes and Valari beam lances struck in the same breath, different technologies singing in harmonized destruction. The closer of the two command ships shuddered, then came apart along its spine, internal detonations ripping it in half. The second tried to jump out. "Not fast enough," Thalen said through gritted teeth. "Lancers, skew his drive." Pale spears of energy stabbed out, pinning the fleeing hulk just long enough for a Terran destroyer to slam a crippling volley into its engines. The command ship tumbled, trailing molten metal. "They're finished," Ibarra said quietly. "All hostile transponders either destroyed or in retreat," the tech confirmed. "Treaty cipher tags recorded." In the hall, the dome's red warning glow faded by degrees. The crystal dimmed back toward its usual soft sheen. Silence fell once more, but now it was the shocked silence that follows a narrowly averted disaster, full of raw nerves and too quick breaths. Saris exhaled slowly, shoulders dropping a fraction. She looked up, past the treaty projection, past the cameras, toward the dome, and the sky beyond it she could not see. "Commander Cade?" she asked, though she already knew. "We're here," Rowan replied through the skewer link. "So's your palace. A little singed, still pretty." A shaky laugh rippled through the hall. "Casualties?" Hale asked softly, the diplomat already calculating costs and letters home. "Some," Rowan said. The names would come later, heavy as stones. "Not as many as they planned." A voice Rowan didn't recognize spoke up from the human benches, a young delegate, face still flushed with adrenaline. "You did it," she said. We did it. Together. Her Valari counterpart on the opposite tier, a lanky scholar in muted robes, nodded. Our ships fought as one. Saris seized the moment. Remember that, she said, letting her voice carry. When they try to tell you this was a trick, remember that human captains shielded Valari vessels with their own hulls. Remember that Valari crews vented compartments to space to save human boarding teams. Our conspirators thought we would freeze, or flee, or turn on each other. She gestured toward the treaty. Instead, we signed a promise, and then defended it together. Elder Malin was very pale. His fingers clenched around the edge of his bench so tightly the knuckles gleamed. This is not the time for political theater, he said. We have just survived an attack. We must secure the realm, not... Securing the realm, Saris said, starts with chopping off the hands that just tried to strangle it. She looked straight at him. Elder Malin, she said, do you deny authorizing the transfers from the Luminous Hearth Foundation to the Purity Front 3 cycles before Concordia was destroyed? A bead of sweat traced down his temple. Those funds were filtered through several... Do you deny? Rowan cut in from the comms center. His voice fed through the hall speakers. Meeting with Senator Kerry's aide at the Keelan's Gate Summit 3 weeks before this treaty conference, under a diplomatic seal that no one else had access to? You have no proof, Malin snapped, composure cracking. Dr. Sol touched a control. A still image appeared above the dais. Malin, exiting a small meeting room, his crest clearly visible. A human in understated formal wear behind him, partially turned to the camera. The station's timestamp and encryption marks glowed at the corner. Neutral hub cameras are tedious in their honesty, Sewell said. So are banking AIs when subpoenaed with the right cross-faction warrants. A low murmur of outrage swept the Valari tiers. Some delegates recoiled from Malin. Others stared in stunned disbelief. This is a smear, Malin hissed, concocted by a queen besotted with a human pet. Rowan didn't remember crossing the hall. One moment he was in the comms center. The next, he was storming down the central aisle of the negotiation chamber, security protocols screaming in his ear. Colonel Ibarra swore and waved the guard back. Saris stepped aside, eyes wide. Rowan stopped at the base of Malin's tier and looked up at him. I watched children die on Concordia, Rowan said. His voice was not loud, but it carried. Human and Valari both. I watched them claw at walls that wouldn't open because someone had locked them. For 23 years, I thought that was incompetence. I thought that was the price of chaos. He took a step up, then another, until he was close enough to see every line in Malin's face. Turns out, Rowan said softly, it was men like you. Malin sneered, but there was sweat on his upper lip now. You think I ordered the bombs? You think I keyed in every code? I think you paid the ones who did, Rowan replied. And when their work was done, you helped bury it. You let the story calcify into we can't trust each other, because it kept you powerful. Malin's gaze flicked around, seeking allies. Some looked away. A few still glared at Rowan, not yet convinced. But the tide was turning. You could feel it. Saris spoke again, voice knife-sharp. Elder Malin, by the authority of the Luminous Crown, I suspend your position on the High Council pending full tribunal. Your crest is revoked. Guards, remove him. He drew himself up. You overreach, child. The Council will never... The Council, she said, is about to learn that their queen walked through fire once already. I will not flinch from smoke now. The guards moved. Malin tried to pull away, robes snapping. For a moment, he looked like he might say something else, some last poison to spit. He caught Rowan's gaze instead. You think you've won, he said. You and your scar and your queen. You think people will love this tidy story. But fear is older than you. Older than any treaty. It will outlive you. Maybe, Rowan said, but it won't outlive all of us if we keep kicking its teeth in. The guards hauled Malin away. On the human side of the chamber, a similar scene played out as Senator Kerry's name surfaced in live feeds pouring in from Terra. Raids on his offices, frozen accounts, staffers led away in cuffs. The stone veil web was fraying, strand by strand, in front of the entire galaxy. Saris turned back to the treaty, her gaze finding Rowan's across the room. For a heartbeat, the public spectacle fell away, and it was just them again. 2 tired survivors standing in a hall built on top of old scars. "We have work to do," she said. He nodded. "Good," he said. "I'm not done being a terrible influence yet." Peace did not descend like a blanket. It crept in around the edges of exhaustion. By the time the last hostile ship had either been destroyed or fled, the palace's upper levels looked like a hive that had barely survived being kicked. Messengers ran, med teams rushed wounded soldiers through corridors, comms officers tried to filter a galaxy's worth of incoming calls into something manageable. Rowan found a quiet balcony by accident. He'd gone looking for a report station and stepped through the wrong door. Suddenly he was outside, the night air cold against the sweat on his neck. The capital spread below, a glowing tapestry of crystal and light. Above, the stars burned sharp and indifferent. He leaned on the railing, letting his brain slow down. Metal creaked softly behind him. "You always did have a talent for finding exits," Saris said. He turned. She changed out of the ceremonial robes into a simpler gown that clung and fell in clean lines. The luminous patterns dimmed. Her hair was unbound, falling in dark waves. Without crown or court or cameras, she looked younger and infinitely more dangerous. "And you always did have a talent for finding me," he said. "It's easier now that you glow on every feed," she said wryly. "Half the outer net has already started writing improbable fiction about us." "Fantastic," Rowan said. "If they get my scar wrong, I'm suing." She came to stand beside him at the railing. For a few breaths, they just looked out at the city. "The last time I looked at you under starlight," she said quietly, "you had soot on your face and blood in your hair." "You had half a station's worth of ash on your shoes," he replied. "Nice upgrade." Her laugh was small but real. "Do you regret it?" she asked after a while. "Concordia?" he said. "Or today?" "Both," she said. "Either." He thought about it. "I regret every person I couldn't get to a pod," he said. "I regret not breaking into those sealed systems sooner. I regret that I let them convince me you were dead, and then built my life around that lie without trying harder to rip it open." He glanced at her. "Today? I regret that we didn't have more proof before we went public. It's going to be messy." "Messy, I can handle," she said. "My people thrive in chaos. It's boredom that kills us." "Lucky you," he said. "Humans get killed by everything." A comfortable quiet settled. Below, in the lower plazas, crowds had gathered spontaneously. From here, they were just a sea of moving light. Glow strips, banners, the occasional flare of someone waving a device at the sky. "They're chanting," Saris said. Rowan listened. The sound came faint and distorted, but rhythm carried through. A phrase repeated, in Valari cadences and Terran inflection both. He didn't know the exact translation, but he knew the feeling. It was the sound of people deciding they were done being afraid. "You're trending worse than I am," Saris said. "Half of Lyrion is calling you the Scar of Concordia." "Not sure that's flattering." "It is," she said. "Scars mean survival, not weakness." Her hand lifted, hovered, then settled lightly on his cheek again. "They told me this line was the shape of my grief. It is not. It's the shape of your refusal to let go." His throat tightened. "Are Saris?" he corrected himself, the old name almost slipping out. "What happens now?" "Now?" she said. "Tribunals, committee hearings, endless meetings. The traitors on both sides will try to wriggle out of the noose. We will tighten it, slowly, until they run out of air." "Romantic," he said. "We'll also have to endure a horrifying amount of commentary on our relationship arc," she added, "some of which will be oddly accurate." He snorted. "Let them talk." "You don't mind?" she asked. "Mind?" he said. Saris, they already stole half our story. They buried it under lies and patriotism. If people want to tell it now as something that means we can do better, they can have at it. Just no biopics until I'm dead." "What is a biopic?" she asked, brow furrowing. "A terrible Terran art form," he said. "I'll show you the worst of them. You'll beg me to put you back in council chambers instead." She leaned her head against his shoulder, very lightly, as if testing whether the contact would shatter. He didn't move away. "For years," she said, voice barely audible over the distant chants, "I dreamed of finding you again. In those dreams, it was always quiet. No politics, no treaties, just you knocking on a door one day with that stupid lopsided grin saying, 'Hey, I escaped.'" "I don't have a stupid lopsided grin," he said automatically. "You do," she said, "and you didn't knock on a door. You walked into my throne room with a delegation at your back." "Subtlety was never my strong suit," he said. "I noticed," she replied. He hesitated. "Do you wish it had happened differently?" "Of course," she said. "I wish we'd had 5 quiet years on Concordia first. I wish we'd had time to be just 2 people." She turned, looking up at him. "But we are not 2 people," she said. "We are a queen and a soldier, tangled in the threads of a history we didn't choose. We can either pretend to be smaller than we are, or we can stand up and be exactly this inconvenient." He barked a laugh. "Inconvenient? That's one word for it." "I've been called worse," she said. "Same," he answered. The balcony wind picked up, cool and sharp. Saris shivered almost imperceptibly. Rowan shrugged off his formal jacket and draped it around her shoulders. She arched a brow. "Chivalry." "Thermoregulation," he said. "Your species runs hotter than ours. Post-adrenal crash, ambient air probably feels colder comparatively." "Ah," she said. "Science. Very romantic." "Always knew that was your type," he said. She smiled, soft and sudden. Her hand found his again, fingers threading without hesitation. "For what it is worth," she said, "I would have recognized you even without the scar." "Liar," he murmured. "Your walk," she said. "Too much weight on your left heel. You got that after Concordia. No, before. Training accident. You favored it for months." He blinked. "You noticed that?" "I noticed everything," she said. "I was in love with you. It was extremely inconvenient at the time." His heart did something painful and ridiculous. "Still inconvenient?" he asked. "More," she said simply. He laughed once, helplessly, then leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't a dramatic, sweeping thing. It was slow, careful, 2 people who had been denied this touch for most of their adult lives finally closing the distance between them. Stars went on burning. The crowd went on chanting. Somewhere inside the palace, officials shouted about logistics and tribunals. On the balcony, for the first real moment since Concordia, Rowan Cade felt like the universe had gone quiet enough for him to breathe. When they parted, Saris rested her forehead against his. "Tomorrow," she said, "we deal with the fallout." "Tomorrow," he agreed. "Tonight," she added, "we pretend there is nothing in the world but this balcony and that stupid grin." He smiled, lopsided, because of course he did. "Deal," he said. Below them, the first night of peace on Lyrian Prime stretched long and fragile and filled with the sound of people daring to hope. Peace didn't hold for long before someone tried to stab it. 3 days after the battle, while tribunals were still being planned and evidence packets assembled, the assassination attempt came. It started as a routine audience. Saris had insisted on holding open petitions in one of the lesser halls, symbolic reassurance, that the crown was still accessible, still listening. Rowan thought it was suicidal, but also very on-brand. He stood at her side with a small honor guard, 2 human marines, 2 Valari lancers. The hall was full of petitioners, their grievances ranging from land rights to trade routes to complaints about noise from human docking vessels. Integration will be loud, Saris said to that last one. You may purchase ear dampers from the trade stalls. Next. The next petitioner was a slight Valari woman in plain gray, fingers laced around a small case. Her eyes were too flat. Rowan's instincts screamed. He shifted, one hand drifting toward his sidearm. The Marine on the left mirrored him a beat later. Your name? Saris asked. Kyle, the woman said. Her voice trembled just enough to seem plausible. From the outer lattice. My family lost a brother on Concordia. Saris's expression softened. I am sorry for your loss. I lost many I considered siblings there. I know, Cale said. I watched your broadcasts. I saw you standing with the human who lived. Her gaze flicked to Rowan, full of something that might have been hate, might have been envy. You loved him. You chose him. Rowan took a step forward. Ma'am, if you have a question, make it quickly. She smiled, small and cold. I only wanted to give you a gift, she said, so that you remember that some of us do not forgive so easily. Her hand moved toward the case. Rowan didn't think. Thinking was for people who weren't watching the angle of a wrist and the tension in tendons. He lunged, grabbing her forearm, forcing it down as the case snapped open. A blade of shimmering light erupted. Valari phase steel, humming with lethal energy, burying itself in the crystal floor instead of Saris's chest. The hall exploded into motion. The Marines tackled Kyle, slamming her to the ground. The blade flickered and died. A Valari guard kicked the case away, boots grinding shards into dust. Saris jolted backward, one hand pressed to her sternum where the knife would have gone. Rowan's heart pounded so hard he saw black at the edges of his vision. Are you hit? He demanded. She shook her head, eyes wide but clear. No, She looked at the would-be assassin. Kyle laughed, high and brittle. Look at you, she said. The queen who survived fire, hiding behind a human shield. Restrain her, Rowan snapped. The guards hauled Kyle upright. She didn't struggle. Her gaze burned. They died on Concordia, she hissed at Saris. My brother, my cousins. And now you stand with him and tell us it was all a conspiracy? That we should make friends with the people who left us to die? Saris straightened slowly. No, she said. I tell you that the people who left you to die are being dragged into the light. Humans did not kill your brother. Valari did not kill him. Stonevale did. Names, Kyle spat. Shadows. Excuses. I watched humans die trying to get Valari to safety, Saris said, voice tightening. I watched Valari hold doors open for human children as the air burned. The ones who killed your brother are the ones who ordered systems locked and bombs placed and then blamed it on nameless radicals. They have names. They have faces. And they will face judgment. You will see it with your own eyes. Kyle faltered. Just a fraction. You expect me to trust that? She whispered. No, Saris said. I expect you to watch. She nodded to the guards. Place her in secure custody, she said, separate from the general cells. She is not a criminal. She is a weapon someone else forged and pointed at us. As Kyle was dragged away, she shouted once more, He should have died there! You both should have died there! Rowan's jaw clenched. Saris watched the woman go, shoulders rigid. Saris, he said quietly. She looked at him, eyes bright with something that wasn't quite tears. This is the other side, she said, of what we did. I know, he said. She's not wrong, Saris added, voice low. Concordia burned. We survived. That fact will always look like a conspiracy to those who never saw the corridors. We can show them, Rowan said. The logs, the footage, the tribunals. Some will believe, she said. Some will not, but at least we won't be lying anymore. He reached out, took her hand, squeezed it once. Also, he said, because levity kept him from screaming, you really need to let your security team run better background checks. That was your security team too, she pointed out. Yeah, he said. We're firing them. She huffed a short, startled laugh despite herself. Outside, the feeds picked up the assassination attempt within minutes. Some channels screamed about instability. Others fixated on the image of Rowan wrenching the blade downward, Ceres stunned but unhurt. Hashtags bloomed like mold. Some painted Kaal as a tragic figure, driven to extremity by grief. Others called her a traitor to peace. A fringe few argued that the attack had been staged to make the Queen and her human lover look brave. Rowan wanted to throw the entire interstellar net out an airlock. Hale found them in the aftermath, expression carved in lines of worry. "Are you all right?" he demanded, barely bothering with titles. Ceres nodded. "Bruised pride, shaken guards, no blood." "Yet," Hale muttered, "this will fuel the hardliners for weeks. See? Our queen chose a human, and now our own people turn knives on her. The narrative writes itself." "Then we write another," Ceres said. "When the tribunal convenes, Kale will have a front-row seat. She will hear every piece of evidence we've gathered. She will see whose account paid for the bomb that killed her brother." Hale studied her, then Rowan. "You're both insane," he said. "You know that." "Absolutely," Rowan said. "That's why it's working." Hale sighed. "Fine. I'll build the media strategy around your suicidal honesty." He glanced at Rowan. "Also, that dive you pulled? Someone captured the footage from 3 angles. You're now officially the man who took a knife for the Queen." Rowan groaned. "Kill me." "Too late," Hale said. "You're a symbol now. Symbols don't get to die. They just get increasingly dramatic fan art." Ceres blinked. "What is fan art?" "An inevitable curse," Hale said. "We'll brief you later." As he stalked off, muttering about crisis management, Ceres looked back at Rowan. "You have a choice," she said quietly. "You could step back now. Let the treaty machinery grind on without you in the center. Live out your days as a nameless advisor in some quiet sector. It would be safer." "For me," he said. "Not for you." Her jaw tightened. "My safety is not your responsibility." He raised a brow. "You're right. It's my choice." He stepped closer until there was only a breath between them. "I walked out of Concordia with a scar and a secret," he said. "I'm done hiding both. If being at your side puts a target on my back, so be it. It was there already. At least this way, I get to see who's aiming." Her eyes searched his, searching for something. Weakness, hesitation, the smart decision. She didn't find it. "Stubborn," she said. "Always," he replied. She exhaled slowly. "Very well," she said. "Then we stand exactly where they can see us, and we do not flinch." "Deal," he said. They clasped hands again, in full view of a dozen watching aides and guards who pretended not to see. Beyond the palace walls, the galaxy argued about them, praised them, cursed them, drew them in glowing lines on digital murals, and called them everything from fools to saviors. Rowan tried not to focus on any of it. He focused on the warmth of Ceres's hand in his, the echo of Kaal's fury, and the understanding that peace was not a line you crossed. It was a cliff edge you chose to stand on together, daring the wind to throw you off. The tribunal hall had been carved from the oldest crystal in the palace, its walls veined with deep, steady light. Once, Ceres told Rowan, this chamber had been used to settle disputes between warring lattice clans. Today, it would weigh something far heavier. The room was packed. On one side sat the Valari High Council, minus Malin and those already under house arrest. On the other, a Terran envoy panel, patched in via hardlight projections from the orbiting embassy ship and a neutral court station. In the tiers above, carefully vetted citizens, among them Kaal, the would-be assassin, watched in tense silence. At the center stood a circular platform where witnesses would speak. Above it, a web of display screens waited to show evidence. No music, no ceremony, just the hum of ancient crystal and a galaxy staring down at its own rot. Rowan stood just off the platform with Ceres, Hale, and Dr. Sol. His stomach felt like it had been replaced by compacted metal. "You don't have to go first," Hale muttered. "We can ease them in with banking records and intercepted comms." "No," Rowan said. "The logs are numbers. Concordia was people. The story starts with them." Saris's hand brushed his wrist. Not quite a touch, not quite an accident. "They will try to tear you apart," she said softly. "Call you unreliable, emotional, compromised." "Good," he said. "I am emotional. About this, I should be." The presiding arbiter, a neutral sector magistrate whose species looked like a collection of carefully curated angles, struck the crystal rail with a staff. The sound rippled through the hall. "This tribunal convenes to examine events pertaining to the destruction of Concordia Spire and the subsequent attack on Lyrian Prime," the arbiter intoned. "We will hear testimony, review evidence, and determine culpability without regard for faction or rank. Let it be entered that the proceedings are broadcast live to all subscribing systems." He turned his gaze to Rowan. "Commander Rowan Cade of the Terran Defense Fleet," he said. "Step forward." Rowan did. His boots rang on the crystal. The center of the platform lit beneath his feet, calibrating position and biosigns. "State your history with Concordia Spire," the arbiter said. Rowan took a breath. "I was stationed there as a lieutenant," he said. 23 years ago. I was assigned to protect the Joint Cultural Program. On the night of the station's destruction, I disobeyed orders to abandon my post, and instead escorted members of the Valari delegation. His gaze flicked to Saris, to the evacuation hub. He didn't sugarcoat it. He walked them through everything he still remembered and everything he'd tried to forget. The sabotage, the locked hatches, the failing gravity, the last pod. "Official reports state that no Valari survived and only a handful of humans," the arbiter said when he finished. "Yet both you and Queen Saris did." "Because someone decided the truth was inconvenient," Rowan said. "The logs we recovered from the under-archives show remote overrides from access channels that should not have existed. Those channels link back to foundations and offices controlled by—" He nodded toward the evidence cluster. Dr. Soul triggered the display. Names lit the air. On one side of the hall, several Valari councilors shifted uneasily. On the projection benches, a Terran opposition senator went white as his own funding web appeared in stark detail. "The pattern is clear," Rowan said. "Stonevale funded fear. They had every reason to kill Concordia and every reason to bury the survivors. 23 years later, they financed an extremist fleet to stop this treaty." "You speak confidently," one of the Terran envoys said, a woman with a clipped accent and eyes like polished steel. "Yet you were in love with a Valari heir at the time. You are now publicly bonded to the Valari Queen. How can we trust that your testimony is not colored by attachment?" Rowan held her gaze. "It is colored by attachment," he said. "I cared about her then. I care about her now. That doesn't change the numbers in your banks or the encryption on your orders. Check them. Verify every pattern. If you find that my feelings altered the data, I'll walk myself out an airlock." A murmur rippled through the tiers. The envoy blinked, caught off balance by the bluntness. "That will not be necessary." Another counselor leaned forward, a Valari elder with cloud-pale eyes. "Why testify now?" she asked Saris, though the question was nominally for Rowan. "You could have allowed the story of Concordia to stay buried. Your popularity is high after the battle. Exhuming these corpses could weaken your reign." Saris stepped onto the platform beside Rowan without being asked. The sensors recalibrated, humming higher. "Because they are not corpses," she said. "They are wounds. You can cover a wound and pretend it is not there. Eventually, the rot spreads. I am done watching infection eat my people from the inside." "You're wagering your throne on that sentiment," the elder said. "Yes," Saris replied. "I am." The tribunal heard more than just them. Kyle was called, under gentle but firm questioning. She stood on the platform, bristling, and told them about her brother, how he'd gone to Concordia to work in the joint labs, how the news of the explosion had come wrapped in official phrases and little else. They told us it was a noble sacrifice, she said, that terrorists struck, that he died defending unity. But they never showed us how. They never gave us names to blame. Just fear. When they played her the clips of intercepted Stonevale communications, leaders talking about our acceptable losses and necessary catalysts, the knife of her hatred turned point. Her gaze slid to Rowan and Saris. "I still hate that you lived when he didn't," she said, raw. "I probably always will, but I will hate these people more." She pointed at the hovering names. "They took him from me," she said. "Then they aimed me at you. I refuse to be their weapon again." In the Terran segments, testimony piled up. Aides who'd realized too late what they were filing, whistleblowers with scrammed voices, pilots who'd ferried suspicious cargo under sealed orders. A pattern emerged, ugly and undeniable. Carey tried to spin it, even from custody. He claimed he'd been misled, that he'd signed off on budgets without knowing where the funds went downtree. But Ledger AIs had no interest in saving his career. They recited transfer chains with impartial cruelty. On the Valari side, Malin's staff cracked faster. "He said Concordia was a mistake," one admitted, voice shaking. "He said too many ordinary citizens were starting to like humans. That if we didn't remind them of the danger, the Crown would be pressured into concessions we'd regret." "He called the explosion a tragedy," another added. "In public. In private, he called it an opportunity." Saris listened, face unreadable, but for the slight whiteness of her knuckles around the rail. Finally, the Arbiter called a recess. As attendees spilled out into side halls to shout into comms and argue with their superiors, Rowan and Saris retreated to a small antechamber carved into the wall. Hale and Dr. Soul followed, the latter looking shell-shocked and exhilarated at the same time. "This is going to crack half the old alliances on both councils," Hale said, pacing. "You realize that?" "Good," Saris said. "I am tired of alliances built on mutual denial." "You also realize the hardliners will call this a witch hunt," Hale added. "Some of them will use it as an excuse to pull back from cooperation. See? Look how corrupt the other side is." "Then we show them how corrupt both sides were," Rowan said, "and how we took those people down together." Dr. Soul finally spoke, voice reverent. "This is going to change a century of scholarship," she said. "Every textbook on the first era of human Valari contact, every lecture on Concordia, all of it. We're rewriting the myth while we're still living in it." "That's the point," Rowan said. "We get to decide whether the story gets told honestly this time." Saris looked at him, something like wonder in her eyes. "You keep saying we," she said, "as if it is the most obvious thing." "It is," he said. "You think you're getting rid of me now?" A knock at the chamber door cut off her reply. A young Valari clerk poked his head in, eyes wide. "Majesty," he said, "the Arbiter is recalling the tribunal. They're moving faster than expected." Saris arched a brow. "That is either very good or very bad." "Both," Rowan said. "Always both." They went back in. The Arbiter stood, staff in hand, as they resumed their places. "We have heard sufficient testimony and reviewed sufficient evidence to establish a pattern," he said. "Further details will be examined in subcommittees. But on the key question of whether coordinated actors within both governments conspired to sabotage Concordia Spire, scapegoat extremist groups, and later organize an attack on Lyrian Prime to disrupt the treaty, the tribunal renders the following judgment." The hall held its breath. "Yes," the Arbiter said simply. "They did." The words fell like stones in a still lake, sending out ripples that would take years to fully fade. "Those named herein are stripped of office, pending criminal trials in independent courts," he continued. "Their assets are seized, their communication networks dismantled. A joint reconstruction commission will assess damages owed to the families of Concordia and to those affected by the recent attack." The list of names rolled out. Carey, Malin, a half-dozen mid-level bureaucrats who thought they were hidden. 3 media moguls, 2 corporate chairs. Their titles sounded strangely small compared to the harm they'd caused. When the Arbiter finished, He turned towards Saris and the Terran envoy panel. "These verdicts are only the beginning," he said. "Power vacuums will form. Reactionary movements will try to capitalize. But there is also an opportunity. The joint treaty you have signed has survived its first assault. Its strength will depend on your willingness to face your own histories without flinching." He tapped the staff once more. "This tribunal stands adjourned." In the upper tiers, Kyle rose to her feet. For a heartbeat, Rowan braced for another outburst. Instead, she cupped her hands around her mouth and shouted, voice raw, "For Concordia!" Others picked it up, human and Valari both, voices overlapping in messy, imperfect chorus. "For Concordia!" The phrase rang around the crystal hall, a chant rewritten, not as a justification for fear, but as a rallying cry for those who refused to be ruled by it. Saris's eyes shone. She turned to Rowan. "Walk with me," she said. They stepped out onto the central platform together. No crown, no military helmet, just two people at the eye of a storm. Cameras zoomed in, eager. "To the citizens of Lyrian, Terra, and beyond," Saris said, her voice carried by 1,000 channels. "You have just watched us drag our ugliest truths into the open. Some of you will be angry. Some of you will be afraid. Some will ask whether peace is worth this upheaval." She reached for Rowan's hand. He took it without hesitation. "I cannot answer for you," she said. "I can only tell you what I know, that fear built on lies will always be more dangerous than any enemy across the stars. That love between so-called enemies is not a weakness, but a warning, proof that the lines we draw are more fragile than we think." Rowan added his voice, rough but steady. "I'm not interested in being your hero," he said, "or your symbol. I'm a soldier who made a choice on a station that should never have burned. I made the same choice again on this planet. Stand with the people in front of you, not the ones hiding behind your fear." He exhaled. "If that upsets your favorite politician," he added, "maybe ask them why." A startled laugh broke through the tension here and there. Saris squeezed his hand, a tiny private acknowledgement. "Peace," she said, "is not an end state. It is a series of choices. It is the decision every day to hold on instead of letting go. I chose to hold on to this man when every advisor told me he was a liability. He chose to stand beside me when every friend warned him it would paint a target on his back." Her gaze swept the hall. "Now it is your turn," she said. "Choose." They walked off the platform together as the chamber erupted, not into a single unified cheer, but into a cacophony of voices. Some shouted approval, others shouted doubts, questions, anger. A few shouted slurs. Rowan listened, oddly comforted. If everyone had swallowed the story uncritically, he would have been more worried. Real change was always loud and uneven and full of people screaming over each other. In the corridor outside, away from the worst of the echo, Hale caught up to them. "You two are going to be insufferable in the history books," he said. "Just so you know." "Write them better than the last batch, then," Rowan said. Hale looked at him for a long moment, something like reluctant respect in his gaze. "You did well," he said. "Both of you." Dr. Saul bounced on her toes, unable to contain herself. "You did more than well. Do you realize how many dissertations are going to start with this tribunal? I need to bribe the archival AI to give me priority access." "Please don't corrupt my archives," Saris said wearily. "Too late," Sewell said. "Knowledge wants to be free." Rowan shook his head, smiling despite himself. For the first time since they'd arrived on Lyrian Prime, he felt something that wasn't just adrenaline or grim determination. He felt the faint, fragile beginnings of relief. Weeks bled into months. The immediate fires cooled. Trials began in earnest, moving at the glacial speed of legal systems across two species. Some of Stonevale's architects pled guilty under mountains of evidence. Others fought tooth and claw, losing slowly but loudly. In the meantime, the world did what it always does, no matter how earth-shaking the headlines. It kept going. Joint patrols became routine. Mixed crews complained about each other's food and music and work habits, which was a significant upgrade from shooting each other on sight. Trade corridors opened. Human children started bringing Valari sweets to school, and Valari teens started imitating Terran fashion in ways that made both their parents despair. Rowan found himself in a new role he hadn't trained for, liaison commander. His days were less about firing patterns and more about mediating between captains, smoothing over cultural bumps, and making sure the new protocols didn't accidentally trigger old alarms. "You're good at this," Thalen told him once, during a rare quiet moment on the Shard of Dawn's observation deck. "I'm good at yelling in 2 languages," Rowan said. "It helps," Thalen said dryly. On Lyrian, Saris juggled a dozen crises at once. Hardline factions tried to use the tribunal as proof that the crown was unstable. Reformers tried to use it as leverage to demand sweeping changes overnight. "Everyone sees an opening," she told Rowan one evening, curled sideways on a couch in her private quarters, bare feet tucked under her. "Some want to push me through it. Some want to push me off it. None want to give me time to breathe." He lay with his head in her lap, staring up at the ceiling's dimly pulsing veins. Her fingers traced idle patterns through his hair. "Breathing is overrated," he said. "You can do a lot on stubbornness and caffeine." "We don't metabolize caffeine," she said. "Explains so much," he replied. She flicked his ear, but her touch was gentle. They fought, sometimes. Not the glamorous kind of fight stories like to romanticize, the mundane, grinding kind born of exhaustion and pressure. Once, after a grueling week in which a joint patrol had misinterpreted a Valari gesture and nearly caused a border incident, Rowan snapped during a strategy session. "You can't keep expecting my captains to know every nuance of your 1,000-year etiquette," he said. "They're learning, but they're not mind readers. And you cannot keep treating my cultural expectations as optional fine print," Saris shot back. "We are not humans painted blue. We have our own lines. Some of them are non-negotiable." The argument spiraled until both of them fell silent, breathing hard, staring at each other across the room. Hale cleared his throat carefully. "Perhaps we should—" "Get out," they said in unison. He fled. They stood there, stubborn and hurting, until Rowan finally exhaled. "I'm scared," he said, "that I'm going to screw this up, that I'm going to miss something, say something wrong, and it'll light everything on fire again." Saris's shoulders dropped. "So am I," she admitted. "Every moment, every decision. There is no manual for how to not accidentally insult your ally's fleet while you're both dismantling generational trauma." He barked a broken laugh. The tension cracked. "Maybe we should write one," he said. "Volume 1, she replied. Chapter 1, Apologize Faster. They apologized. They got better at catching themselves mid-spiral. They learned what tone meant "I'm angry" and what tone meant "I'm scared and hiding it badly." They learned, slowly, how to be not just queen and commander, but partners. The galaxy learned alongside them. Some worlds embraced the new era eagerly. Others dragged their feet. A few tried openly to sabotage it, only to find themselves facing unified consequences from both Terra and Lyrian. It wasn't smooth. It wasn't pretty. It was real. On the 1-year anniversary of the treaty, they held a remembrance ceremony, not just for the battle over Lyrian, but for Concordia. The site of the old station was now a debris field marked by beacon buoys. Human and Valari ships gathered there, floating alongside a newly built memorial platform. Families of the dead attended via holo. Survivors watched. The feeds carried it across systems. Saris spoke first. "Concordia was meant to be a bridge," she said, standing on the platform's edge, stars wheeling behind her. "Instead, it became a grave. For years, those who profited from that disaster used it as proof that we could not trust. Today, we reclaim it as proof that we must." She nodded to Rowan. He stepped up, throat tight. "I don't have fancy words," he said. "I have faces. People I remember laughing in corridors that don't exist anymore. People whose names were used as warnings instead of blessings." He swallowed. "Some of you will never forgive that we lived when they didn't," he said. "I understand that. I share it. But if our lives can do anything, Let them at least make sure this doesn't happen again. Let them be the line where this kind of manipulation stops. They released memorial lights into the debris field, small spheres that drifted outward, glowing softly. Each carried a name encoded in its core. As the light spread, they formed a faintly visible pattern. Not a wall, not a barrier. A net, a web, something meant to catch, to hold. Later, back on Lyrian, Rowan and Saris walked the crystal gardens, the same ones where they'd first stolen a quiet moment after the battle. The lights were beautiful, Saris said. They were, Rowan agreed. You cried, she added. Rude, he said. I liked it, she replied. It means you're not numb yet. He bumped her shoulder with his. Not with you around. They stopped beneath the humming crystal tree where they'd kissed for the first time in this new life. Saris turned to him, eyes luminous in the low light. We will be tested again, she said quietly. You know that. Of course, he said. People like Stonevale don't just vanish. New ones will rise. Old wounds will itch. Someone will always try to cash out on fear. She nodded. Does it bother you? She asked. Knowing this never ends? He thought about it, about wars and quiet postings and treaties, about burned stations and shaking halls, about scars on faces, on planets, on histories. No, he said. It weirdly helps. She tilted her head. Helps? It means there isn't a final exam, he said. No perfect, we did it, story over. There's just us, waking up every day and deciding not to be cowards. He took her hand, pressing her palm to his scar. Deciding to keep surviving. Together. She smiled, slow and bright. Together then, she said. Always, he answered. They stood there, under humming crystal branches, two small figures in a galaxy that would keep being complicated and dangerous and strange. Their love story wasn't a neat arc with a tidy fade-out. It was a heartbeat in the middle of an ongoing song, a stubborn, steady pulse that said, we are still here. For now, that was enough. The end. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe for more HFY romance, first contact drama, and galaxy-changing love stories.